funding is, it is.
Anybody else say anything? I'm good.
No, good. No, I think that when we have our meeting in the spring, we go over the budgets.
Yeah.
We either put a slide up or we tell everybody.
Yes.
So everybody knows.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I didn't know that. I didn't know the extent to which they were funding different things.
no,
Oh,
I
yeah,
didn't
so
realize.
it's a long laundry list.
Yeah.
It's great.
Everything.
You know, the kids, you probably remember years ago, I think it was Mr. Velati used to do the swim lessons.
Yeah.
Well, now there's a lady that does it up at Colebrook,
Correct.
and, you know, they have to be like, Red Cross certified and all that, and they have to pay to use the pool, they think, and she has to have a lifeguard there, but they still are teaching kids how to swim through this funding, which is a nice thing.
Yeah, that's fun.
You
Yeah.
probably remember when they used to teach it at Miller's Beach.
Yeah, they took you to the dam and they threw you off.
Swim!
That was a while.
I didn't get it.
That was kind of the test.
Yeah.
It would be nice though, I was just thinking on, like swimming lessons at Colbrook, if they would let them use the pool as a donation to the
They
town.
may do that,
Yeah.
I'm not
You know,
exactly
it would
sure.
be
Sometimes
really
they do.
nice.
They
It's
donated
like-
it to the youth center
That's
this
something
past
you to
summer.
Put in your head,
Yeah.
That's great.
because if you can get businesses and places involved in town, it'll benefit them.
Oh, yeah.
It's good advertisement for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Look
good,
at
thank you
that,
very
there's a
much.
sheet here.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you.
I'm the youth commissioner,
Oh,
and I'm newly appointed, so I don't know much, and my treasurer has opted out, and so I'm here.
it sounds perfectly
Yeah.
normal.
Yes.
They'll you for everything.
Well, no, the budget looks
Yeah, the budget.
really,
Yeah,
I mean, very
Budget is stable and level funding from last year.
much.
And what's your name?
Michelle LeVake.
I take that back, it was a $10 increase in that budget from last year.
how do you spell that?
Leves.
S?
S, yes, as Sam.
Yeah.
Q-U-E.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a mouthful. Great. As far as this year's going, do you think it's gonna be anything that you're expecting that we should know that, like we're saying, bad things befall us, but
No.
everything looks pretty normal?
Yep,
Yeah.
we do an event every other Friday upstairs. We order pizza and supply drinks, and last Friday we had a Valentine's Day celebration, and we had I brought in a big speaker, and we had some music and dancing.
Excellent.
They seem to be having a good time. I see them around town, and I'm a school bus driver here in town as well. So I see some of them, and they're like, we had so much fun up there,
That's
and
great. That's what we like to hear.
yeah, that's.
Yeah.
What age?
It's been 11 to probably maybe 14 is what, we're open from 11 up to 17, but
Okay.
it seems to be we're drawing the younger kids. And
Good.
hoping though to keep them as they
Yeah.
Yeah.
get older, so give them something to do and keep them out of trouble.
Great.
That's important.
Exactly, yes.
Yes, that's great. Thank you
Okay.
very much for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for serving as the new.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks a lot.
for taking it on.
Yes,
God
that's.
bless you, as far as I'm concerned, with that age.
That's simple. Probably see you tomorrow, Dennis.
See you later. She got a little cutie pie for her daughter, Emily, goes, I think she drives a bus.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
And she brings a little girl into Dunkin's, she's the sweetest little thing.
That's a pretty important meeting place in the morning, down at Dunkin'.
Yes.
They should all run for office.
And haven't done anything on that South Barry Common thing.
Well, nobody's here for
Well, I
that.
know that, but I'm just wondering what.
Isn't that supposed to go into one account?
That was,
Isn't that what they were gonna do?
what they were discussing was how they might disperse the holiday decorations account, where they had increased a little money that they had used from the selectmen's expense last year. Andrew had moved some of that in this proposed budget into the holiday decorations, and then make it more than just Christmas decorations, and he was talking
Yeah.
about trying to create like a subcommittee that would kind of figure out where best to apply those funds. And he thought that this would potentially fall under a request to that subcommittee saying, could we use some of that? I generally understand the concept, but I do think we should rename that whole account so it doesn't come off like it's a holiday decorations. Maybe more of an event, something, you know, I don't know, event support.
So it'd be more
funds.
than just holiday then?
Right,
Yeah.
because the big thing that I see here anyway, is the Southbury Common Expense was requesting 500 because they've been relying on local vendor to open up their bathrooms for people to use it when they do their music every Saturday. And it's starting to become a burden to that one particular vendor, and so they're like, everything else outside of DPW grooming the site under their Parks and Recs account is all volunteer.
Yeah,
So there's a part of the feeling was we're kind of pushing what we can get from the volunteers to try to then get porta potties.
I agree.
I'm back and forth on the situation personally, because I kind of do agree with the whole, can the community come together and come up with it versus the entire town. But then I look at it and say, we're talking $500. There's a part of me saying the town can kind of help that because it also helps the vendors down there for going to buy something that they can't get at the things like that. So there's a balance, and I'm kind of back and forth myself.
And I think especially the bathroom situation, if you go to a place where there's no bathrooms, there's gonna be trouble and it's gonna be a mess, all right? And you gotta fix that.
And the people attending, it's going to decline. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, or they're not going to stay an hour and a half, like that.
Right, they won't enjoy the whole event, they'll stay just long enough and then go home to.
Right.
Right.
And they've really started creating a kind of a consistent, say, clientele or whatever that comes to see the bands, and so it's become regular.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think the more I think about it, I do think it's worth us funding the $500 to help them get porta potties.
I would go for that. I think that's important.
And it's gonna be harder, I think, for her to make a case to that holiday decorations or whatever we call that account, because that's more of like a one-time big event type
Yeah.
decision. And they're talking about, through the season, they're gonna have 10 musical events through 10 Saturdays or something, and they need the porta potties for every event. I don't know if the subcommittee may see that in the same light as a Christmas or a Halloween event. And so they may,
Block it, yeah.
and it's nothing against either the committee or the Southbury Common Committee's request, it's just they don't necessarily fall in the same group of why they're asking.
Yeah, right.
And so that's where I would say if we could come up with the 500, I think it'd be worth giving them $500 to do that.
I don't have any.
I have no
But
problem at all.
I thought they were gonna do a whole, for the whole town.
Well,
The way you talked at that selectmen's meeting that I was at.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that
it's
committee
talking
was intended for the whole town,
For
so not just
everybody.
events on the
So
North
my
Common.
question on this was, why have we got a separate budget line for this when you're going to try to have them all get in
Partly
one
because I
in a
don't
big-
necessarily think this fits that other program he was speaking of. This request is more of a yearly maintenance saying that the other one is almost,
This could be included with the other one though.
right, but again, this is 10 events, not one event. That's what I'm saying. So somebody reviewing that to disperse the money may see it as an outlier to all the other requests they get. Because that holiday expense could now fall on a Memorial Day to supplement what we do for Memorial Day parades or Veterans Day parade, where that's always been well organized by the American Legion, and I don't think they've ever asked for a dime. But things change, and then who knows what police details start showing up and things like, so that's where I'm saying, once that gets developed, there's gonna be a lot more callers than just Halloween, Christmas, and South Berry Common. And we didn't put a lot of money into it. So I'm just saying, even though Andrew moved some money from an account he used last year to help supplement, create a bigger one, that money still just went to 2 events that already used that money. So there's a part that's gonna be like, okay, so how do we cut out of the events that are already using that money to then use that money at another event? And that's why I'm saying if we just put it in the budget saying, you get your 500, and that's what you get. Now you manage your events with that 500, and that's your budget for the year. And not go through another avenue of requesting for the money where, and you know it as well as I do, committees dispersing money have less public influence on them than a budget vote at a town meeting. So if you give them 500 and suggest maybe this is the right approach in the budget and the whole town speaks to that item, then they kind of have it. If we think that's the right thing to do. But if you just put it in a line item that another committee will then start dispersing, it's not the same
Well, what
general control of where would it go and
Right.
do they deserve it.
Right, what would happen, Matt, Claire, everybody, is, you put it in that account to be dispersed to everyone, okay? But somewhere along the line, you're going to run into a situation where there's a problem with something, or something happens with one of these committees, and they're going to receive the bulk of the money. And-
What they talked about was to have one general, this is the way
Right,
I
right,
understood.
right, I understand
With a
that.
chairman,
Yeah.
you know, set it all up,
Mhm. But like I say.
and that would go. Now, if you're gonna do this with the 500, my suggestion would be, you're gonna do the 500, the use of porta potties. Specifically use it.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
too.
specifically use that for the porta
Right.
potties.
So they can't, so what
I
they
got
can't,
you.
yeah, you know what I mean,
So they can't go buy a
And that
popcorn
would-
machine.
Exactly, yeah.
I think that amount of money would just about cover it for the season.
Yeah.
See,
'Cause
I don't
they
know, I've
do-
never
They
like,
do over in Phillipston, and I think it's like 500 or 600, because Jim handles that at the
Yeah.
beach.
Yeah.
And that's from Memorial Day
Yes,
to Labor Day.
right.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
agree
there.
with Claire, I think that should be
It needs to be
specific,
specific.
because they pointed that out as a need.
Okay,
So we're gonna take care of that need.
all right, so we'll just change that to.
so very common
Yeah.
expense,
And then
porta potties.
Yep.
Has the selectmen chosen a committee? I mean, has there been a committee?
We haven't even written the charge, so it hasn't been
Yeah.
presented to us to get to that point yet. We've had some preliminary discussions of who we think should be involved, how we should go about
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
An open period for applications, so it's
Oh.
not just the first 5 people that show up, but
Okay.
if 20 people want to apply and we're only gonna choose 5 or 7 or whatever they think is the right one, then allow all 20 applications to get in, not just the first 7 that show up get it. But, yeah,
And then
so
you're
there's,
gonna
and
do
then
Like any holiday.
there were 2 different thoughts on it. One is they would make the decision on where to put the money. But then what I said, at least to start with, and we could always revise the charge later, is I would suggest that they make a recommendation to the select board or the select board finance committee of where to send the money, and then we would vote on approving that disbursement. So in other words, it does bring it to a higher level.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then maybe over time, we may grow with the comfort of how they distribute, and then say, revise the charge and allow them to make that decision to just do it. But I thought it does 2 things. One is, it keeps the town from getting angry with that committee on what they do the first year.
Yeah,
You know, it puts it back on us,
Yeah.
which is kind of where it should start, and then let it grow. And that was my suggestion, but we really haven't gotten more than just throwing that out on the table. So,
Yeah, makes sense.
Kind of on the subject, but off the subject. And Matt, I think you know about this, or I hope you do. A couple of years ago, the town voted some money to do some sidewalks over at the town
Yeah.
common area.
Yes, sidewalks.
Yeah, well, I mean, have you talked to Mary Ann at all about that situation?
I'm aware
Oh,
of,
okay.
this is what I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Okay, it was brought up, and it was actually brought up, I think, late last fall to DPW commission. At a meeting, it was brought up again.
Oh, good.
And one of the things that was brought up is they can do it at that price, but they've gotta make it fit with everything else they're doing. So if we wanted to put more money in, they could just have a contractor come in and do it.
Is it on a schedule to be done?
And it wasn't on a schedule. And I
First of
asked
all, it has to
about
be put on
that,
the schedule.
and it kept coming up of the difficulty they have scheduling that versus the other things they're trying to schedule, which,
I think probably the best, my own feelings on the budget. Probably, we have a set amount of money, put it out for bid and do that, as much as you can do. And that takes the burden off the DPW, because with highway foreman being badly injured.
yeah,
And
it's gonna be hard to get
It's
to
going to-
all the things they wanted to
Right.
get to.
so, maybe you could suggest to the rest of your board that they put it up a bid for the money they've got and do what they can do.
yeah.
And then if we need, that'll, at least then, I think you guys will know, well, we can do this much.
Yeah.
And, well, okay, we'll do that much, and to do this much is gonna cost that much more. And go to the town and we just
Yeah,
more
well-
money into the sidewalk account.
Yeah, I do, there's a couple things I think we need to bring up to DPW commission, and we'll try to get those on the agenda and see if
Excellent.
we make some progress on that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know if this comes into play with this, but we had applied for a complete streets grant for sidewalks in South Barre. Is that what you're talking about, South Barre?
Yeah, because the money that was voted at town meeting was specifically to do the sidewalks in South Barre.
I don't know,
They were
maybe they
earmarked.
held off because they were hoping we won the grant, but we didn't.
Oh,
So,
it did win it?
No.
Oh, okay.
Other towns got it the first round, so I don't know where it's at now, but
Yeah.
we did put in for it.
So if you don't win the first round, are you out, or you have to?
We're out of that.
Oh, okay, so you would have to,
Maybe
Reapply.
for another
Reapply.
round, reapply,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think it might have had something to do with all the sidewalk work our town had already gotten with the common project, so they would be having another town help them, you know, didn't wanna
Kind of a big
overrun it.
picture look.
Yeah, that kinda share the, so.
Did you follow through with that, Dennis?
Mhm.
Find out about it?
Mhm.
So who we
You know,
got?
I don't think that sidewalk money is earmarked for Barry. It was just sidewalks for
Yeah.
the town.
When at the time, when I made the motion on the floor, it was.
Because it's not written that way.
Well,
Yeah.
it was
Carry forward.
it was stipulated that the money was to be used for the sidewalks and stuff there. And one gentleman got up and asked if it was gonna be concrete or blacktop. And our statement at that time was that we're gonna do concrete, because the ones that are there probably been there for 80 years or better.
Yeah, the wool probably put it
Yeah,
in.
Yeah,
and you know how
yeah.
long blacktop lasts. Drive around town or any town in the state, you can see how long it lasts.
One deep snow and it
Yeah.
goes for a ride, yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, but that's how it was presented, and that's on tape too, Fred.
Because I know in the general ledger book, it just,
Yes, because
Sidewalk.
it does go into the sidewalk account.
yeah.
I think that was the one that was the 30,000 in 2015?
There were a few of them on there.
I wonder if they used some of it, because they had only carried over to this year so much, 30,000. I don't know if they made any progress,
Is
or
that-
started buying material and then haven't actually installed it, I
I
don't know.
don't know.
Yeah, they bought some curving,
Yeah,
That might have been it then,
yeah,
so.
yeah, very well put up.
So that's why, I'm just looking at this year's budget.
Yep,
So I see what you're saying.
they had 10,000 in the sidewalk account. For any sidewalk you wanted to do.
Okay.
And then they added the 40 to it. So if there's 30 there now, they spent 20 somewhere.
There are several articles.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, there were
Yeah.
2 other articles that were probably
Yeah.
that 10,000 that
Yes,
you added up, okay.
that's like the bridge account. The bridge account's the
Yeah.
same way. You
Yeah,
look at 10 years.
this year you got this year you got that,
Exactly.
okay. And I think they're gonna use up a good amount, if not all the bridge stuff this year on that
Yeah.
Canesta Brook, whatever one they're trying to do now.
Anybody here from the other people?
Conservation, maybe?
Conservation and zoning,
That would be Ron Rich,
Right.
he said he'd be here.
for conservation.
Maybe things
I'm not,
6:30.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they were they in time slots?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
But remember, the meetings didn't start at 6.
Yeah, they stuck to 7, so.
Yeah, so that might be why.
Unless they were reminded.
Because we had our meeting last night.
Yes,
I think,
7:30?
yeah, I think because Mary Ann's working downstairs, and these are kind of account numbers that she usually focuses on.
Right.
They're her account for her doing the minutes and that, and then the account for expenses, like, which is also something I think she normally is handling for, yeah, like buying paper or whatever they have to buy.
Because she's,
Drawing
that's
sets.
planning board, conservation, ZBA, Parks and Recs, the youth commission, and the South Barry Common.
Right.
Yeah, she,
So she was kind of involved with most of the items that came on tonight, and she knew she couldn't attend, so,
I, looking at the zoning, there's nothing out of the ordinary that stands out.
I think that's,
It's pretty much, what it's been for the past 2 or 3 years.
and I think it's almost like a placeholder, because it only happens when someone's asking for a variance and they have to have a meeting.
Exactly.
So
Right.
that's why, like last year, they didn't spend any of it, because no one
Yeah.
came before them and asked for that.
So they don't have to have a,
So it's
So
a
many meetings.
placeholder, so
No.
if they have meetings, she can cover her costs for doing her work, but if they don't, then she's begging for money to do her job, because she doesn't have money to do it. So a lot of times, like last year, it just rolls into the free cash at the end of the year, and or when we agree to those file transfers to cover.
right,
Thing is, though, we were trying to make the departments responsible and to come in, you know?
I mean,
Have to bring
this
an
is
issue
one
up.
where maybe she could get away with
Yeah.
cutting it in half if you think that's worth it. Because it'd probably get her through a meeting or two to find out if it's gonna grow, and then come back before the board and say, can we transfer from another account? Because, I mean, if you feel kinda like what you're saying, if it's $750, but she's really not using it every year, is it better to
Well,
give
what
her
I'm saying
400
is-
and see if that 350 helps with the
We
porta
need to
potties?
see a person from the zoning board come in to make them responsible for their board position.
Understood.
We have, a lot of times, they just don't bother coming in,
I don't even know who's on
and we
Oh,
said
wow.
we needed
But if you eliminate-
responsibility this year.
If you eliminate their budget,
Yeah, well, that's what Andrew said.
Yeah, that's what he said,
Yeah.
because he was the one that said they should all
I
be
think
in.
these are
so
so
they
long.
also need responsible.
I think that's it.
Right.
Expenses.
But It's so minimal.
On the conservation, it looks like he needs more time
Yeah,
for
conservation
this
should
year,
have
so I
something.
guess something must be going on.
Somebody should be here for that.
Yeah.
I'm on the conservation
Okay,
as
so there
well.
more activity?
Between solar, the marijuana, trying to do the bylaws with all this,
Okay.
site
Conservation has
visits, you name it, we're doing it.
They have a dog in that fight as far as marijuana goes.
With the
Oh, the
recreational,
conservation, you mean?
the recreational, we're looking at adopting a bylaw and then trying to get everything done in time for the
Well, that's
warrant
the
and the town.
planning and zoning, though, isn't it?
Well,
No, it's conservation.
He's saying that,
No, you mean the growing of it?
Well, the regulations behind it all.
I didn't realize they were being included in it.
but
I was told
Yeah,
it was
it's funny.
planning and zoning.
there is some,
Yes to both of those. Conservation, if they're going to be putting these in anywhere, then we're involved, because it has to go through the whole application process. We have to go do the site visit and all of that.
So it's kind of like getting conservation's input on the zoning or the overlay zoning. We want to put it here, how much is that? A
Okay.
wasted space to call out, because conservation will flat out say that's conservation land, don't even call it a zoning area. I don't know, I'm guessing there's some overlap there.
I'll give you an example. Last night, Mr. Dean Iandoli came to the conservation meeting for a notice of intent with the electrical hookups for the medical marijuana grow facility he's putting in up adjacent to the solar farm he owns on Vernon Ave. So that came to the conservation, and it was all discussed. So, you know, we've gone up there and have done site visits for the solar farm of that. So, you know, we're gonna have to again go up and look at everything, and, so we have pulled into it.
mm-hmm.
So are they gonna build a building, all that
Yes,
stuff?
yes.
Mm.
And right now, with the state's Cannabis Control Commission, some of us members on planning board went to a seminar put on by CMRPC and two members of the Cannabis Control Commission at Worcester State College last Friday or Thursday, for a half-a-day seminar on that. And, you know, they're still working on the state laws on this, you know, whether they're gonna allow smoking facilities, you know, it's a pretty big undertaking. It is, it's really big. And in fact, the governor has been almost on a daily basis putting something out there, trying to redirect the control commission to focus more on one aspect of it than the other. And almost every day you look at the newspaper and in the media, there's all these towns that are adopting their bylaws. Some are going with a complete prohibition, some are going with, like what we did, a moratorium, until we can come up with, you know, a vote for a bylaw at our annual town meeting in June, and put a couple of different questions out there to get what the voters are looking for. And it's kind of a multiple step process to get there. And we've been in collaboration with several other towns, getting their inputs on a lot of this too. So it's a lot of work.
Just interested in your comment about smoke. Can't smoke a cigarette tobacco, okay? Arrest you. But in the same building, if you're smoking marijuana,
They just
okay,
opened one in
figure that
Worcester.
one out. I can't figure that out. Smoking, smoking.
It's just, I think they're trying to develop the same concept of the cigar bar.
Yeah, like on.
So if you're gonna allow groups of people to get together that smoke whatever product we're gonna smoke,
You can do it.
they want them to do it in a building, so it's not outside blowing across. So in other words, they almost wanna create the building that can then try to filter the air, so everybody outside the building isn't necessarily having the same effect.
They're still gonna smoke it outside.
Well, if they smoke it outside in this town, it's technically illegal, because we do have a bylaw for it. No matter what the state says, you can't smoke it outside. How that gets enforced or doesn't get enforced, that's outside my,
Yeah.
Wouldn't
But I'm
wanna be a
just-
policeman with
because
that
you're right,
rules.
it's bound to happen I work in Worcester. I step out City Hall and every day I smell it. So it's somewhere, I know it's happening.
But the people that don't shouldn't have to put up with the people that do, just like cigarettes, you know.
Well, but like
It's the same
with
thing.
cigarettes,
You don't get high on cigarettes.
Cancer.
we're not Cambridge. You're still allowed to smoke it on a sidewalk. So now what you're saying is it should be more extreme than cigarettes, at least in this town. Or you want bylaws that are that extreme for both, and that's okay if that's what, I'm not,
Yeah.
but as the law is written, it's already a little bit more extreme in this town than cigarettes is. It's, or more, I don't know if extreme's the right word.
Regulated.
Thank you, regulated.
Yeah,
Can't-
It's just, it's one of those things, it's, once it was made legal, now we're just trying to find our best. And we gotta be careful because we can't over-regulate it or the state will deny the bylaw.
Because it has to go.
Because once we write it, they still
Oh,
gotta
that's
say
right.
you
Yes.
didn't kinda write a law against our law. You can't conflict with the state law that I
Yeah.
got approved without going back to the town for a full town vote. And then even then, it's a fine one, because I guess, you know, they still are trying to say this is an industry that's legal. You cannot just say no.
But the federal
Without a lot of
government
steps
says it's
going.
no.
That's the conflict.
Well, I was talking to a manager of a bank, and they won't have anything to do with any loans that have any affiliation with marijuana,
They
They
really
can't.
can't.
because the federal government will come in
And
and
it's
shut
a,
them
it's a
down.
They're
cash
regulated.
business.
They're regulated by the feds,
Yeah,
you know, not the state so much, but the
Yeah.
feds.
And
yeah,
then they're also looking
so they
at,
can't.
years
Right,
ago,
exactly.
you used to be able to sit
So
down in a
they're-
bar room, have a drink and smoke a cigarette.
oh, yeah,
They're not gonna allow smoking of marijuana and drinking in the same establishment. They have to be separate.
And I think that's like, even for countries that have had marijuana forever, Amsterdam, I think is the same way.
Yeah, they
You
don't.
can go to a coffee house and have some marijuana, but you cannot have alcohol and marijuana in the same establishment there either. And, it's just, the concept of mixing drugs is crazy, I guess.
And along the same lines as like the ABC, Alcohol Beverage Control Commission, the Cannabis Control Commission is like a mirror of that.
you're right, right.
So they are regulating alcohol, they're regulating marijuana, and they're trying to adapt the rules like the other ones have in place already. And, you know, trying to be fair with everything, it's pretty tedious. I'm sure it wasn't done overnight when the ABC started either, because they had a prohibition in the whole country back in the 30s, wasn't it, against alcohol. So,
The only thing.
That's what created the Great Depression, that decade of prohibition.
bathtub gin.
Everybody was depressed, and let's face it. The only thing I see on conservation is, actually, I don't see anything.
The only thing Andrew recommended was,
Well, yeah, yeah.
I think Andrew was trying to just recommend the regular COLA, the 2% increase.
Plus, if I may, there's quite a few classes that are put on by the Conservation Commission, what's the name of it? CCM, I think is it, where they, because we're not professional conservationists, the only one that really is Ron Rich, because that's his forte, he's a forester. And if you look at the laws or suggestions for board members, the state recommends you have a forester as a member of your conservation, which makes sense, who knows better about, you know, that than a forester. But, I guess, I'm just looking at classes for us, the same thing with planning board, these classes cost money. For the planning board, we're going to some classes up at Holy Cross College this spring, they have them every year. And each year we try to do, there may be a dozen classes, you know, intermittent planning board, introduction to planning board. And you go down the line, and the further down the line, the more stringent the course is. Same thing with conservation. It helps us be able to understand and do our job. because we don't have degrees in it. We're part-time planners, part-time conservationists. And we rely a lot on the input from DEP and, like CMRPC, we're pretty lucky with, that they have full-time planners that we can communicate with, and our town attorney, and the special town attorney that we use on occasion. And that eats up quite a bit of money. I mean, we don't get paid for any of it, we don't get mileage, we don't get, but we're lucky enough that the town will pay for the course.
We don't need that.
I'm not
And there are
complaining, I'm
courses,
just
too.
saying.
This specific line item for the secretary clerk, where they had asked for an increase by about, it looks like 2,000, and Andrew was just saying that 2% for, Mary Ann's statement below was because the board does ask her to start doing some research that is more than just taking the minutes, writing the agenda. So as she's now trying to do online research or other things like that, she doesn't really have the hours to spend because she doesn't have the money approved to spend the time.
Well, that's what I was wondering, what was going on when I saw that. I mean, and she's not gonna put it in there just to sit
And when
around.
she's down, pardon me, when she's downstairs working for,
Questions.
the clerk's office,
They need to come
technically, she's not supposed to be doing the planning board and all that,
Yeah.
those sorts of things.
Yeah.
She's got designated hours with them that, you know, her time is pretty well spent. And then the added burden of the planning board and conservation, and throw in the ZBA, the South Barry Common and all that it has nothing to do with the paid hours. That she does as a volunteer basis. But the way we get inundated with, and the phone calls and all the people trying to get in touch to get, you know, special permit requests, notice of intent information, you know, she's busy, real busy.
Ted, I would recommend that we ask Fay to have Ron Rich come into our next meeting, unless he shows up at
He
7.
may think it's 7.
Yeah, unless he shows up,
Yeah.
because there's too many questions.
Right, I mean, the thing is, it looks like a lot of activity here
Yeah.
that hasn't been there before,
No,
that we're
hasn't
gonna see
explained.
coming on a going
Oh,
forward
yeah.
We
basis.
need
Yeah.
to see
Especially,
that.
I see now that you're involved with the marijuana stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And I'm,
gonna be crazy this year.
I'm not the chairman, so I don't wanna speak out of
Yeah.
turn.
Yeah.
No,
So
I'm
I
saying,
think
that's
he
gonna be
needs to
crazy
come.
this year, you know that.
And the deadlines are coming up. I mean, we still have the moratorium in place until December, but we wanna try to get some kind of a bylaw in front of the voters by
Town
June.
meeting,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that would make sense.
And
We have a joint meeting.
We're meeting with
next
the
week, right?
selectmen next Monday?
I think so,
20th.
the
I think.
20th.
Yeah,
That's,
so,
Tuesday, right. 'cause
Tuesday, yeah.
Monday is the President's Day.
yeah,
so we're gonna discuss some of these issues with them.
And then you're meeting with the Board of Health on Wednesday, right?
Yes.
So I think you should ask Fay to
Yeah.
have him come in for both of those, with there's so many questions on it,
He'd be better,
with all the new stuff coming out,
yeah.
unless he shows up at 7, which he might. Do you have his phone number?
I could try to call him if you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. We could get it closed.
no,
Matt-
that's right.
Matt, you should have 35,056 in that sidewalks account from the articles. Because I've got the one,
Total or all the articles together?
all the articles together.
Okay.
This was as of the end of January, so
Yeah,
there
I'm
might be
looking at a
some
February
different-
5th
Oh.
budget.
Yeah, I haven't got a new,
And I'm guessing they didn't do much on sidewalks during it, so I'm
yeah,
guessing.
but they couldn't have done
Yeah,
that.
they're involved in all this stuff, it's only-
'Cause I've got-
Outside of buying materials in preparation, but again, I don't think it was on their schedule, so
No, I'm
I'm not expecting them to
This is
go
the
done.
latest
Right.
one?
This is the January 19th. I haven't gotten one since then.
But if they have what?
Just got one, yeah.
Stuff,
Well, that might be it, that might be it. She just sent.
That would
Notice the
be
date
excellent.
last week.
Right.
Put it on.
You know,
Yeah,
then
I
the
think
contractor
that's-
doesn't
because I
have to buy
printed
it
off
$3
as soon as
a
I
month,
got it in.
you know, it's already purchased, you know. Whether it's
But
enough
some of
or
these
not,
are
I don't know,
old stuff.
But still.
I mean, in general, we're not
So,
doing that.
yeah, I didn't do it down to the pennies, but I was getting
Yeah.
35,000 and
Yeah,
change as
yeah,
well.
that's what that is. Do you, I'm looking at the sewer. Encumber FY17, what's that
I
mean?
don't know, I looked at that myself and I didn't know what that
I'm
meant.
wondering what that means.
What I believe it means is they had either a prior invoice or purchase order from FY17 that didn't get completed, and they carried it into the FY18 to pay off stuff that was already prepared to be done,
So
but
it's
not
like an
completed.
open invoice,
Yeah.
that it must be.
But, yes, which one is that you were looking at?
The sewer.
Encumber, yeah, the 11,002. Yeah,
Because there's
They paid-
454 left.
and my guess is what it was, and I'm not 100% sure,
Yeah.
I'm guessing, is that's the amount they had allotted. That's what they thought they were gonna have to
Yeah.
pay, but the final invoice was 454 less. So that money will just end up rolling into their enterprise account, or however that free
Yeah.
cash enterprise
So
thing
they're
works
gonna
on
get
an
some
enterprise
money.
account,
$454.
so.
You're on top of that
It
enterprise
better,
account.
it better not be, what do they call that?
Ted's on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew's got a way of looking at that. You can have an enterprise operation that is also funded a little bit by the town.
Yeah,
Okay, that's a legitimate thing. And, however, when you have money left over like that, that's not licensed to kill, okay? That's like some other budget kind of
oh, I gotcha.
that.
So if the town's budgeting it and you don't expend it, that
Right.
should go back into the
Yeah, you
general
don't
free
buy a
cash,
truck.
not stay in the
Yeah.
enterprise.
You don't buy a truck on the day of town meeting,
Yeah.
okay?
Right.
That's over
Right.
with your money. So
Yeah.
that's my, but I talked with Andrew about it. And he's got a way, he had a way of looking at that. I think that would be the right thing to do, because they're not gonna ever be a true enterprise situation right away. Some of those debts are just too much, you know? And I mean, to me, this town would be really bad without that sewer system, let's face it. You know,
I mean, my understanding is that's part of what holds back some of the Hubbardson development, is they don't have sewer. So
probably.
it's harder for them to put in the bigger
Yeah.
commercial on 68 they
Right.
would benefit from, but
Mhm.
Yeah,
that's what I understand. I
Tell
don't
them to
know
come
if
to
that's.
Barry, we got it.
If we could just figure out how to get across this valley
Right.
called Burnshirt River,
Right.
I'm sure it wouldn't be a bad connection,
Yeah.
but,
We need a
because I was dreaming about that the other day, saying, oh, you know, if that's the case, we're kind of downhill, and then I realized we're downhill, but then back up and
Yeah.
down, and so I'm not really sure how
Yeah.
We need a new skyway.
exactly, we'll put a
Yeah,
big
well,
sewer
no.
line up in the air and hope it never falls.
The water department, they have an article on there from 2016. Pickup truck with a plow, and they have $841 left there.
they have some left over. Yeah, but they're a true enterprise zone.
Yeah, they pay there.
So-
This-
so
That was
they
before they
can-
were
they
in
can have
enterprise,
that
wasn't it?
What's that?
Wasn't that before they went enterprise?
Oh, last year they-
No, I think they've been in enterprise.
They've been in enterprise for 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, I think that's legitimate.
You think that's legit?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
retained earnings. That's the magic term. That's retained earnings for them.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. yeah.
They have almost 206,000 in a water upgrade. Now, which upgrade is that?
I don't know.
What do you-
It could be a
On
new,
the,
it could be
this.
a new well they'll need to put in.
that
Put money
changes
aside
up.
for that.
Well, I'm guessing.
Good.
I'm
I
just
don't know
wondering
if
what
that's,
it's for.
but that would be my guess.
Certainly a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I see, the unencumbered balance.
Right.
yeah, and then that, I just wondered what they were, because I didn't remember what,
Yeah.
it hasn't been questioned or anything.
The, no, but they, they generate enough income into the enterprise to pay their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Any news from Mr. Rich?
No.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, Rand's not downstairs yet either, so I left him a message.
happy with
I would
this?
almost suggest that might be a typo too,
You think so?
because it's a negative expenditure. So that it's like they received $104,000 for a water upgrade, unless we had to front it and then we finally, 2 years later, got reimbursement on a grant. That looks like it. Because the original number of the carry forward in the original budget, 31,000 and 70,000, brings you to 101,000 and change. But then the expended is minus 104,000, so that's how you get to a 205,000. So I'm not saying it's
Can you
a
pick up-
mistake. It could be a mistake, or it could be somehow we got revenues, but we're showing it in the budget expenditure versus just unexpended. You know what I mean? It's, I don't see how you could get a negative in that line item.
100,000 expense.
Yeah.
I don't know how heavy that would be.
What about the solar system they were supposed to put in down
On the DPW shed,
there?
it's in,
Yeah, okay.
it was a power purchase agreement, I believe.
Yes, yeah,
And because of that, Andrew, I think, and Fay are looking at the electric bill and the solar production, and then the cost to try to see what we are or are not getting.
yeah.
As well, I think DPW and Shannon might be doing that too for their side. But I think that technically is falling under the highway department, not the water or sewer. So it's still the general fund expense that's covering for hopefully saving some of the National Grid costs down there.
Right, so that money will go right back to the general fund at the end of the year. If there are any.
Right, and it looks like, when I was reading the agreement, it's something, we get a lower supply rate from the solar than we would if we bought the supply from National Grid. But because it's a power purchase agreement, we don't get zero.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's more like we just pay the solar company a cheaper rate than we paid National Grid for the supply. But then we pay National Grid the complete cost for everything that doesn't come from the solar.
Yeah. Right.
So we're offsetting like a percentage of our normal usage, but it's not offset by 100%, it's just offset by, say, 25 or 30%.
Maybe just depends on
It's
it.
a little different than owning your own
Sure,
system
if
and
we
getting
were
all
on
the
or off.
benefits from it.
We were on at 6 o'clock.
Lights are on.
What?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock?
Yeah.
The meeting tonight, the finance, I thought it was 7 o'clock.
No, 6.
No, it's-
Okay.
I've got one more question,
Yeah.
or to let you know.
That was
The
in
town
Worcester.
bond
That
account
was in Worcester at 6
is
o'clock.
overspent $1,100.
Oh yeah, Wednesdays are hard for
Yeah.
What?
What are they
Andrew
doing?
mentioned-
You didn't miss
Andrew
anything,
mentioned that
really.
the other day,
We had a little
them
bit
and
of
the
discussion.
police.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the town bond, what are they doing?
I don't have a clue.
What?
What are they doing in the town bond? They were overspent $1,100.
I
As
think
of
they
now.
found one invoice as of February 5th that was misapplied to the account, so now they're at 98%. And they're still reviewing to figure out how they got there and what they're gonna do to get through the rest of the year.
Yeah, because it's gone.
I brought it up to the accountant and DPW commission, well, superintendent, just saying, hey, I noticed we've exceeded. One, you gotta review it, and two, I personally wasn't gonna be signing off more pay warrants that charge against that account until we figure out what to do with it. Cause it seemed odd, cause I thought that was like a more of a general maintenance and utilities type account. And it's only 28,000 to start with, so to be
Yeah.
through that. Now, the other question is, did we not properly predict the change in utility rates? Did we not, so did we go through more than we thought because we thought we were gonna save more than we did, either with the solar, or are we paying more because National Grid gets their wintertime rate increase from Department of Public Utilities because they say it costs more, and that's why. Which, I
Yeah,
don't think it costs them another dime. The supplier cost might go up, but the distributor is just maintenance on the lines. I don't understand give me a rate increase just because.
You know, I know I purchased my electricity from another provider, National Grid, so you get two charges.
Right.
And they're charging me more to ship it to me than they have to produce it.
It's going right up.
So,
And I've had a couple comments where I say somehow we've got to work with, whether it's Ann or Donnie Berthium, to get to the DPU to explain that their approval of rate increases does not seem to match the need. But, so the company says, I need more because of this, this, and this, but it's like, I think they're making up numbers, and they're just saying, okay, we'll give you half of it, and National Grid's like, that's what we want to do.
Well, I said, I worked at electric company for 30 years.
Oh, it's still,
You don't get
one
what
was
you
a,
ask for. It ain't easy
wedding
getting money
plan
out of the
with a
state.
big
So rest
thing and a
assured,
hat and a
if they
vintage.
get money, they got beat up on
the
it.
one with the balloons
Oh, right,
on
but
it.
I mean, like I'm saying, they go in with that high number
Oh, yeah,
knowing.
sure.
Yeah, you go in, but I mean,
Funny you mentioned
Thing
that,
is
'cause I
that-
saw that the
but I
other
mean, I
day.
just got something in the mail.
I was thinking,
you wanna get
laughing
all-
about my notebook.
Renewable energy, a big deal at 15 cents.
As soon as I can close
And,
that stuff, I'll use it
And
for something.
I got
Yeah.
Constellation,
Well, it's still
they
good.
got it for 11.6 for
Makes
3
sense.
years.
Yeah, I thought-
Yeah,
Right.
and,
I thought it was too
but
bad.
it was crazy because you go on different websites,
Hmm?
the same company has different prices.
yes.
So when I called up the lady, I said, hey, I went on this
Yeah, that's what I
website,
thought.
you want 12.5 on this website, and 11.6 on this one. So I'll get right back to you, so we'll give you the 11.6, so.
Well, I just
when
found
it's
another
time
one
to
that
do-
says 10.
What I'm saying is, when you get that, do a little bit of looking, and that's point, when you're talking about the town barn, okay, if you're getting some of that energy, you have to buy it from the electric company. Okay, you really gotta look really hard, you can have some other option,
I
because.
do
because-
think it's on the town administrators' things to do,
Yeah,
is what they call municipal aggregation. And this is where you take even all the residents and you reach out to them. The intent here is, what you're trying to say is, we have all these accounts,
right,
and we can commit, say, 80% of the accounts to buy from this source. And then you get the 10 or 11 cent because you're selling a whole bunch to it. And so I think it's not nearly as simple as that, but they're looking into it.
Yeah.
I know my office in Worcester is looking to do that for Worcester, and Worcester's even more complicated because they have even more crazy neighborhoods with special programs from National Grid, and so you put it all together and they're going through hoops to try to figure out. And it's not as simple as the program seemed to say it would be when they said municipal aggregation, it's great. So I know even if he starts today, Andrew's probably not gonna be ready until like next year to say, this is what I think is the right thing to do.
there's gonna be a lot of hairs on that dog.
It's- And you gotta get a good consultant to help you with it,
Yeah.
because it's kind of new, so knowing what the government really is willing to let you do, what the utility companies are willing to do, there's a lot involved.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Can anybody explain what this appellate court interest is? Court judgments? It's a negative $8,556.
That's the treasurer, that's not treasurer's budget, isn't it?
No, this
It-
isn't the check.
It,
What's
it's
the-
an account managed by the treasurer, or paid by the treasurer.
Yeah,
Right.
And when I spoke to Andrew about it, I don't know if you guys remember, but we had an article going into the last town meeting that was like for interest. And it wasn't a big number, but then they pulled it. And it's because the treasurer wanted to get more info, because she realized that number wasn't gonna be accurate. In other words, it was gonna be bigger than what the request was for. this is that. So she was trying to get the numbers and couldn't have it for town meeting to fill in the blank to cover that additional, I think is what Andrew was telling me. We'll have to confirm with him, but my understanding when I talked to him about that same account item is that was the one she couldn't get the number she needed by town meeting to give us an accurate number. So now that she's gotten to this point, she might be able to get the number, and that might be one of those FY18 pay-in arrears article you put on to cover that additional. I'm not 100% sure.
What is it for?
That was not something that really got, I didn't understand what that
That's
account was
I'm
specifically
asking,
for
what is
when we
it?
talked.
It's court
Um,
interest. So is that because we didn't pay a bill and they charged interest on it?
No.
They didn't have they didn't know. They didn't know what the interest rate was gonna be, huh? We're all guessing.
Maybe
Yeah.
we should get an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know. When it's a
Exactly, and I
negative
really shouldn't
amount,
even guess at that, 'cause I have no clue.
$8,000. I'm saying, yeah, we need to know what's that?
What's that called? What's the line item again there?
Appellate court interest,
It's almost at the very bottom of the budget report, right? The last page
page
or
9
something.
of the budget. Okay. And then it's in account, the account court judgments.
You said it was 8,000?
Yeah, $8,556.91.
See, all the way down to 91, somebody knows how they got the number, that's for sure.
Oh, wait, that one's not in arrears though. That's just 100% expended. The one I was speaking to, and I apologize, was temporary debt interest.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
this is.
That one was 5% over expended. That was the article item she was trying to,
Yeah.
so,
I
I
haven't-
apologize, I
See,
confused the accounts in
you
our
spent that
discussion.
money for something.
I didn't guess, but I'm not going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I say, we're all guessing.
So, when you see a negative 8,000, you wonder, what is it?
So what would you like to do, Claire, as far as people coming in?
Well, Ron Rich hasn't been in
Money
for
rich?
zoning and
Zoning
We need a
and
payroll, we
conservation.
think we signed, don't we?
Yeah.
we need him to
Yeah.
come in.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone over his budget, so
Yeah.
it should
He's
be
just-
brief.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, got
I
certified,
think we just
so we'll be on the
understand
ballot.
the problems he's got,
Yeah.
make sure we can handle.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's always a nice feeling, isn't it?
Good
And
point.
if, you know, you
Well,
ask Fay to find out from
Spent
Gene
the day at
what,
the transfer station Saturday.
what's that 8,000?
Actually,
Yeah.
a few hours.
Were you
and
kicking
looked at it.
cans?
Yeah.
This chicken.
I was supposed to.
Was that your feed? I saw
Sounds
something
like
there.
people
People were
Yeah.
watching, so I was like, all right, I better get out of here.
Motion to adjourn?
Yep,
Well, we need to set up, when's our
Yes.
next meeting?
that's next week,
Was
isn't
the
it?
small creature with you?
What's, I
The
don't have
28th?
mine.
I think it's next week.
I thought it was the 28th, I remember there was one scheduled back in the day.
Yeah, originally, but I mean, that's.
I don't have my schedule.
So that'd be 2 weeks away, but
Practice up to.
No, I don't have a cell
practice.
phone.
You know,
What?
you
Matt,
can
look
chalk
up my
this
town
up,
government,
practice.
does
Yeah.
it say that? Oh, she probably
Practice
hasn't
coming in.
posted that yet.
No, she probably has.
well, there was one that got posted, and that's why
I think it
I'll go ahead and look it
I
up.
think it was the 28th.
28th, yeah, 28th 's the next
28th.
meeting.
Okay.
Doing homework, you gotta do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if it even gives
Which
you a
is-
wonderful agenda already, so.
Yeah,
What time was it? That one's at
Last day of the month.
that's a
Claire.
Tuesday.
No, it isn't.
The
It's a
28th
Wednesday,
is
the
No, no,
28th, that's last year's calendar.
It's last year's.
Well, how come we haven't got a new calendar?
Charlie, can we get a new calendar?
We can, and you know, it's
Charlie.
actually, I don't know, you guys let this tradition fall. The newest member is supposed to have, is responsible.
Oh,
Whoever's not here.
Not
is-
here.
well. It's not here.
Well, Faye's not.
That's been passed on to the administrator's office,
Yeah.
and it's still there.
I thought things
About
went
every
downhill.
meeting I look over and go,
I'll stay, I'll
now.
send her a message.
Must have been a good year, we wanna keep
Hey, need a new
remembering it.
calendar.
it is,
My oil company
Charlie,
gave me
6
one for
o'clock
free, I
is what
can
it's
bring
scheduled
it.
for, just so you know.
Yeah,
And it says, building department, council on aging,
Okay,
All
All
in
in
favor?
favor?
Aye.
4-0.
Yeah,
Thank you all for coming.
town clerk and planning board and Wachusett Greenways.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, Charlie.
6 o'clock.
We moved the meetings to 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Well,
And then you can get home at a reasonable hour.
Oh, now you're making up stories. We